I never imagined that the night my family decided to throw me away would be wrapped in fireworks, champagne, and smiles that were never meant for me. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 74 years old, and on New Year's night in Columbus, Ohio, I learned exactly how disposable I had become. The house was loud that evening, louder than usual. Music echoed through the living room, glasses clinked, and the smell of catered food filled the air. My son Daniel and his wife Marissa were hosting a New Year's gathering for their friends. People I barely knew, people who stepped around me as if I were a piece of furniture that could not be moved. I stood near the hallway, holding a folded dish towel in my hands, pretending I was still useful. That had become my specialty over the past 2 years. Pretending. Marissa stood near the kitchen island, tall and polished in a silver dress, laughing as she poured champagne. She never looked at me when she spoke, only at the people who mattered. When the countdown chatter began, someone asked casually, "So what's new for the new year?" Marissa smiled, lifted her glass, and said it like she was announcing a vacation plan. "Well, we're finally taking care of Eleanor's situation." The room quieted just a little. She turned then, finally looking at me, her smile unchanged. "We've decided it's time to move you into an assisted living place. Somewhere appropriate. You're too old to be useful around the house anymore." For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard her. The words floated in the air, detached, unreal. Too old to be useful. I looked at Daniel, my son, the boy I raised alone after his father died. The child whose scraped knees I kissed, whose homework I checked, whose fears I soothed in the middle of the night. He did not meet my eyes. He stared at the floor, at the rug I had helped pay for, and nodded slightly, as if agreeing with a grocery list. "It's for the best, Mom," he said quietly. "You'll have activities, people your age. It's a nice place." A nice place. The word landed like a final nail. No one objected. No one looked uncomfortable enough to stop her. A few guests nodded politely, relieved it wasn't their problem. Someone awkwardly laughed and changed the subject to fireworks. I felt something inside me collapse. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. This was not a fight. This was not a discussion. This was a decision that had already been made without me. I thought of the years I had lived in this house, cooking meals, folding laundry, watching their schedules, shrinking myself to fit wherever they needed me, believing that if I stayed helpful enough, quiet enough, grateful enough, I would still belong. I realized in that moment that I had been wrong. I was no longer a mother in their eyes. I was a task, a problem to be relocated, a burden to be managed. And as the music swelled and the room filled with laughter again, I made a decision of my own. If they were done choosing me, I would choose myself. I would not go quietly where they sent me. I would leave. What hurt the most was not the sentence itself. It was the realization that it had been true for a long time. That night did not begin my erasure. It only named it. When I first moved into Daniel and Marissa's house, it was supposed to be temporary. My husband had been gone barely 6 months. Daniel insisted I should not live alone. He said it made sense for family to stay together. I sold my small home, the one I had lived in for 34 years, and used most of the money to help with their down payment. At the time, it felt like love, like continuity, like I was still needed. In the beginning, Marissa thanked me for helping with meals. She asked my opinion on curtains. She called me Eleanor, not Mom. But I told myself that was just her way. I told myself many things. Slowly, I stopped being asked. My meals moved from the dining table to a small tray in my room because their schedules were busy. My opinions became interruptions. My presence became something to manage. Marissa began speaking about me as if I were not there. "She gets confused sometimes," she would say, standing 3 feet away from me. "We have to watch her spending. She doesn't really need new clothes at her age." Daniel never corrected her. I had worked for decades as a school counselor. I spent my life helping children find their footing when the world was unkind. I believed in patience, in understanding, in sacrifice. Somewhere along the way, I used all of those skills to excuse my own disappearance. My pension and Social Security were moved into a shared account because Daniel said it was easier. Easier for who, I was never sure. When I needed cash, Marissa would sigh and remind me how expensive everything was now. When I bought a book or a scarf, she would smile tightly and say, "Do you really need that?" I began keeping receipts, like evidence of my innocence. The house changed around me. Furniture I had paid for appeared in rooms I was no longer invited into. Family photos were rearranged. I was no longer in the center. Eventually, I was no longer on the walls at all. The guest room became my entire world. I noticed things then. How conversations stopped when I entered. How plans were made without me. How my grandsons avoided eye contact. Embarrassed by the old woman who still folded their laundry and waited for a thank you that never came. I learned to move quietly, to ask permission, to apologize for existing. The worst part was Daniel's silence. Not anger, not cruelty, silence. He let Marissa decide when I ate, when I spent, where I went. He let her rewrite the story of my life as a liability he had inherited. And I let it happen because I was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of being unwanted. Afraid that if I pushed back, I would lose the only family I had left. By the time Marissa announced my future in front of strangers on New Year's night, the decision had already been rehearsed in 1,000 small ways. I just had not realized that I was the only one who had never agreed to it. I waited until the house was distracted. That was the pattern I had learned. If you wanted to move unnoticed, you moved when no one was looking. Music drifted up the stairs, louder now. Laughter burst out in careless waves. The countdown decorations glowed in the living room downstairs, and the guests were busy arguing over champagne flutes and where to stand for the fireworks. No one noticed me walk back to the guest room that had been my world for 2 years. I closed the door softly and leaned against it for a moment, listening to my own breath. My hands were shaking, but not with fear. It was something else. Relief mixed with grief, like pulling a thorn out after letting it fester too long. I packed slowly, deliberately. I took only what I could carry. 2 sweaters, a coat, toiletries. The photo album I kept hidden under the bed because Marissa said it cluttered the room. My wedding ring, wrapped in a tissue. A small envelope with cash I had saved quietly over time. Money I had never mentioned because some instinct had told me to keep one thing untouched. Everything else stayed. I did not take the blankets I had bought. I did not take the lamp from the nightstand. I did not take the books from the shelf that Daniel once said looked messy. Those things belonged to a house that was no longer mine. The hardest part was the letter. I sat at the small desk by the window, fireworks testing outside in short bursts of sound, and stared at the blank page. I had 1,000 things I could have written, years of swallowed words pressed against my chest. I wrote none of them. I kept it simple. I will not be a burden anymore. Do not look for me. I hope your new year is everything you wanted. I folded the paper once and placed it on the bed where I had slept invisibly for so long. There was no dramatic goodbye, no confrontation, no last plea. I lifted my worn suitcase, surprised by how light it felt compared to what I was leaving behind, and stepped into the hallway. As I passed the staircase, I caught a glimpse of Daniel in the living room below. He was laughing at something someone said, a drink in his hand, relaxed and unburdened. For a brief moment, I wondered if he would notice my absence before midnight, if he would look around and realize I was gone. I already knew the answer. I slipped out the front door as fireworks crackled somewhere in the distance. The cold air hit my face, sharp and cleansing. The house behind me glowed with light and celebration, but none of it reached me anymore. I walked down the driveway alone. Each step felt unreal, like I was watching myself from a distance. A 74-year-old woman leaving her son's house on New Year's Eve with a single suitcase and nowhere certain to go. I did not know where I would sleep that night. I did not know how the next weeks would unfold. I only knew one thing with absolute clarity. Staying would have destroyed me. As the sounds of the party faded behind me, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt like I was choosing my own life again. The bus terminal was almost empty when I arrived. That felt appropriate. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in a pale, tired glow. The benches were bolted to the floor, cold even through my coat. A digital clock flickered above the ticket counter, its red numbers counting down the final minutes of the year, as if time itself were eager to move on without me. I set my suitcase at my feet and sat down carefully, my knees stiff from the walk. The air smelled faintly of coffee, metal, and something old and damp. A man slept across 3 seats near the vending machines, his jacket pulled over his head. Somewhere down the hall, a couple argued in low voices, their words swallowed by echoes. Everyone here seemed to be waiting for something. I checked the schedule again, even though I already knew it by heart. The last bus north would leave just before 11. After that, nothing until morning. I had time. Too much time. That was when the weight of it all finally settled in. Not the anger. Not even the betrayal. The loneliness. It came without warning, rising fast and heavy, like a wave I could not outrun. My chest tightened. My hands clenched in my lap. I tried to breathe through it, tried to remind myself that I had chosen this, that leaving was better than being erased. But choice did not make it hurt less. The tears came hard and loud, shaking my shoulders, escaping before I could stop them. I pressed my hand to my mouth, embarrassed by the sound of my own grief. Even now, even here, I felt the need to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible. 74 years old, crying alone at a bus station on New Year's Eve. I thought of Daniel as a baby, curled against my chest, trusting me completely. I thought of the nights I stayed awake to make sure he was breathing, the lunches I packed, the dreams I postponed so he could have more. I thought of how easily he had looked away. The tears blurred the clock above the counter until the numbers melted into red smears. Midnight was approaching, and I was sitting between 2 lives. The one that had quietly rejected me, and the one I had not yet reached. "Ma'am?" I flinched and looked up. A young woman stood a few feet away, hesitating, her brow creased with concern. She wore a dark coat over business clothes, her hair pulled back, her bag slung over one shoulder as if she had been rushing somewhere before she stopped for me. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I nodded automatically. The lie came easily. It always had. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice betrayed me. "Just a long day." She did not leave. She stepped closer, lowering herself to my level, not crowding me, just present. "You don't look fine," she said softly, "and you shouldn't be crying alone tonight." Something in her voice cracked through the last of my defenses. I shook my head, a broken laugh escaping before I could stop it. "I don't have anyone," I said. "I don't know where I'm going. I just know I couldn't stay." She sat down beside me without asking. "My name is Rachel," she said. "I'm waiting on a late bus too. If you want to talk, I can listen." I looked at her, this stranger with kind eyes who owed me nothing, and felt the strangest thing. For the first time that night, someone saw me. And before I could stop myself, I began to tell her everything. I did not plan to tell her the truth. At first, the words came out small and careful, like I was testing the air. I told Rachel that I had an argument with my family, that I needed space, that I was going somewhere quiet for a while. She listened without interrupting, her body angled toward me, her attention steady and unhurried. Then she asked one simple question. "What happened tonight?" Something in me gave way. The story spilled out in uneven pieces. The party, the champagne, the sentence Marissa had spoken so calmly, so decisively. "You're too old to be useful." I told her how my son stood there and said nothing. How the decision had already been made without my consent. How I packed my things while fireworks were being tested in the backyard. I told her I had nowhere certain to go, that I was afraid of being placed somewhere against my will, that leaving felt like the only way to stay human. Rachel's jaw tightened as she listened, not with judgment, with anger. Protective anger that surprised me because she barely knew me. "That's not right," she said quietly. "None of that is right." I shrugged weakly. "It's my family. These things happen." She shook her head. "They shouldn't." For a moment, we sat in silence, the buzz of the lights filling the space between us. Then Rachel looked at me differently, studying my face with a focus that made me uneasy. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Did you ever work in a school?" The question startled me. "Yes," I said slowly. "I was a school counselor for a long time." Her breath caught. "What age group?" "Middle and high school mostly," I replied. "Why?" She did not answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen as if she were bracing herself. "I need to make a call," she said. "Is that okay?" I hesitated. "I don't really want anyone involved." "This won't hurt you," she said gently. "I promise. Just stay here with me." She stepped a few feet away, turning her back slightly for privacy, but her voice carried in the quiet terminal. "Dad," she said, low and urgent. "I think I found her. Yes, I'm serious. I know it sounds impossible, but I'm sure. She's here. At the bus terminal. Alone." I watched her pace as she spoke, nodding, wiping at her eyes once with the back of her hand. "No, I haven't told her yet." "But Dad, it's her." She ended the call and came back, sitting beside me again, her hand warm when she took mine. "Eleanor," she said softly, using my name for the first time. "Please don't get on that bus yet." My heart began to race. Rachel, I don't understand what is happening. She smiled, but there were tears in her eyes now. You will, she said. And when you do, I think you're going to realize that your life didn't disappear the way you thought it did. The clock above the counter blinked. 10 minutes until departure. And for the first time since I walked out of my son's house, I stayed exactly where I was. We waited in silence. My suitcase stood upright between my feet like a question I had not yet answered. Every few seconds, I glanced at the clock, then back at Rachel, trying to read her expression. She looked calm on the surface, but her fingers were still wrapped tightly around mine, as if she were afraid I might vanish if she let go. 5 minutes later, the terminal doors slid open. A man stepped inside with purpose, scanning the room the way someone does when they already know what they are looking for. He was in his early 60s, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed simply but well. His hair was threaded with gray, his face lined in a way that spoke of years spent thinking deeply and fighting hard battles. His eyes landed on me. The moment stretched. Then he walked toward us, slowly at first, as if approaching something fragile. Rachel stood. "Dad," she said. He stopped in front of me, his breath catching. For a long moment, he could not speak. When he finally did, his voice was unsteady. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "it really is you." I searched his face, my mind scrambling through decades of memories. "I'm sorry," I said gently. "Do I know you?" He smiled then, and the expression transformed him completely. The lines softened, the tension eased, and suddenly, I saw it. The boy. Not the man standing in front of me, but the memory layered beneath him. A tall, quiet teenager with wary eyes. A student who had spent more time in my office than in class. A boy who carried too much weight for his age. "Michael Carter," he said. "You knew me as Mike." My breath left me in a rush. Mike. I remembered him clearly now, 17 years old. Sleeping in his car some nights. Skipping meals. One bad decision away from disappearing into the system. A file thick with warnings and red flags that never told the whole story. "You helped me when no one else would," he continued softly. "You didn't call the police when you found out I didn't have a stable place to live. You didn't shame me. You sat with me after school and helped me apply for programs. You wrote letters, you made calls. You even let me sleep in your guest room for a few weeks when things got really bad." I felt dizzy. "I remember," I whispered. "You were so young, so tired." "You saved my life," Michael said plainly, "and you never once made me feel like I owed you." Rachel wiped her eyes beside us. "I tried to find you," Michael went on. "For years, after college, after law school, after my career took off, I went back to the district. Records were gone. Names changed. People retired. You vanished." He took a breath, steadying himself. "I tell my daughter about you all the time. The counselor who treated me like a human being when the world had already written me off. When Rachel described you sitting alone in this terminal tonight, something clicked. I looked down at my hands, at the same hands that had once filled out paperwork, packed lunches, written recommendations late into the night. I didn't do anything special," I said weakly. "I just did what needed to be done." Michael crouched slightly so we were eye to eye. "That's exactly what made it special." The loudspeaker announced the final boarding call. I looked at my suitcase, then at the man whose life had continued because of something I had done and almost forgotten. And suddenly, for the first time that night, leaving no longer felt like running away. It felt like coming full circle. Michael did not ask if I wanted help. He asked how he could protect me. We left the bus terminal together, my suitcase rolling behind me, untouched by the night that had almost carried me away. Outside, the last of the fireworks cracked open the sky, but this time, I watched them from the passenger seat of Michael's car, wrapped in a warm coat Rachel had insisted I take. "Where were you going?" Michael asked gently as he drove. "North," I said. "To a town where my parents once lived. I thought I could disappear there." He nodded. "You don't need to disappear." Rachel turned around from the front seat. "You need safety and choice." Those words stayed with me. Michael and his wife welcomed me into their home that night as if I belonged there, not as a charity case, not as a burden, as family. I slept in a real bed with clean sheets and woke without the familiar dread of being in the way. The next morning, Michael sat across from me at the kitchen table, legal pad in hand, but his voice was calm. "I need to ask you some questions," he said. "Not as a lawyer first, but as someone who owes you his life." He listened as I explained the financial arrangements I never fully agreed to. The shared account. The missing transparency. The way decisions were made for me instead of with me. The nursing home announcement delivered like an eviction notice. Michael's expression grew serious. "What they attempted is not only cruel," he said. "It may be illegal." The word made me flinch. "I don't want to destroy my son," I said quickly. "I just want to be left alone." "Protecting yourself is not destruction," Michael replied. "It's boundaries, and boundaries are overdue." He drafted a letter that afternoon. Not angry, not threatening, precise. It outlined my rights, my financial contributions, my autonomy. It made one thing very clear. I was no longer unrepresented. The response was immediate. Daniel called, over and over, then Marissa. Text messages followed. Confusion turned to panic. Panic turned to outrage. They accused Michael of manipulation, of interference, of poisoning me against my own family. I did not respond. For the first time, I was not responsible for smoothing things over. Michael handled everything. Requests for financial records, proof of where my money had gone, explanations they were not prepared to give. Within days, the truth surfaced. Funds redirected. Decisions made without consent. Plans created to move me out quietly and legally, sidestep any questions later. When faced with consequences, their certainty crumbled. The money was returned. Not with apologies, but with haste. I watched the transfer appear in a new account Michael helped me open in my name only. My name, my control. That night, sitting at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed, I realized something profound. Justice had not arrived loudly. It arrived because someone I once helped refused to let me be erased. And for the first time in years, I felt protected instead of managed, seen instead of stored, valued instead of tolerated. I had not asked the world to give me anything back, but somehow it had. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of a small house with fresh paint on the walls and sunlight warming the floor. It was quiet in the good way. Not the tense silence of a place where you are unwanted, but the peaceful stillness of a life that finally belongs to you. Michael helped me find the house. Not large, not impressive, just mine. A single-story place with a little porch and a yard that needed work. I chose the colors. I chose the furniture. I chose when the lights went on and when they stayed off. No one questioned my spending. No one tracked my movements. No one spoke about me as if I were not in the room. I volunteered twice a week at a local school, helping students navigate the same confusion and fear I once recognized so easily. The kids did not see my age first. They saw my attention, my patience, my willingness to listen. It reminded me who I had always been before I started shrinking. Rachel visited often. Michael checked in without hovering. They never treated me like a project or a debt to be repaid. They treated me like a person who mattered. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that did not ask me to come home. It did not blame Marissa. It did not explain. It simply said, I was wrong. 2 weeks later, he stood on my porch. He looked smaller somehow, thinner. The confidence he once wore so easily was gone. I don't expect forgiveness, he said before I could speak. I just needed to say it to your face. He told me Marissa had left, that the house was being sold, that his sons barely spoke to him. He told me he had replayed that night over and over, the moment he stayed silent, the moment he chose comfort over courage. I treated you like something to manage instead of someone to protect, he said, his voice breaking. I forgot who you were. I listened, not because I owed him closure, because I wanted peace. I love you, I said when he finished. But love does not mean access, and it does not mean forgetting. He nodded, tears spilling freely now. I know. I just wanted you to know that I see it. We did not reconcile that day. We did not make promises. We agreed to take time. Real time. With real boundaries. When he left, I did not feel triumphant. I felt whole. That night, I sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the trees, the same way I had done decades earlier in another life. I thought about the night I cried at a bus terminal, convinced I was ending. I had been wrong. I was beginning. I learned that dignity does not expire with age, that kindness is never wasted, that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away from the place that taught them to feel small. And I learned that being needed is not the same as being valued. For the first time in years, I knew exactly which one I deserved. When I look back now, I realize that the night I stood alone on that porch was not the end of my life. It was the moment I finally stopped living on permission. For years, I believed love meant endurance. I believed that being a good mother meant staying quiet, staying grateful, staying small so others could feel comfortable. I mistook tolerance for belonging and silence for peace. Walking away forced me to see the truth I had avoided. Respect that has to be begged for is not respect at all. Family that treats you like an obligation instead of a person has already chosen convenience over love. Age did not make me invisible. Fear did. What saved me was not revenge, anger, or winning an argument. What saved me was dignity. The decision to stand still, look forward, and choose myself when no one else would. In losing the place where I thought I belonged, I rediscovered who I had always been. I also learned that kindness is never wasted. The smallest act done with sincerity can travel quietly through decades and return when you least expect it. I did not help that young boy years ago for gratitude or reward. I helped him because it was right. And somehow, when my world collapsed, that goodness found its way back to me. Most of all, I learned that life does not end when others decide you are no longer useful. It begins again the moment you decide your worth is not up for debate. 5. Life lessons from this story 1. True dignity comes from knowing when to walk away, not from how long you can endure mistreatment. 2. Family is defined by respect and care, not by blood or obligation. 3. Silence in the face of cruelty is still a choice, and it always has consequences. 4. Kindness given freely can echo across a lifetime, even when you think it has been forgotten. 5. It is never too late to reclaim your voice, your boundaries, and your life. I share this story not for sympathy, but for anyone who feels unseen in their own home, unheard in their own family, or trapped by the fear of being alone. If this story reached you, it may be because you needed to hear that it is not selfish to choose yourself. It is necessary. You are not too old. You are not a burden. You are not replaceable. And if you are standing at a moment where everything feels like it is being taken from you, remember this. Sometimes losing what hurts you is the only way to find what will heal you. What lesson did you take from this story? If you were in her place, would you have stayed or walked away? Tell me your thoughts in the comments and let me know what city you are watching from. If this story moved you, please like, share, and comment, so others who need this message can find it too.